Hello teachers, buonasera, buonasera a tutti e benvenuti al webinar Celtic sullo storytelling. Siete davvero tantissimi, grazie, grazie, grazie. Prima però di lasciare la parola a Louise, che è qui vicino a me, volevo dirvi che queste settimane, queste ultime settimane sono state settimane dense di impegni e di novità qui alla Celtic. Non so se avete visto la nostra pagina Facebook, c'è una novità molto molto importante, molto molto grande, che è questa, il nostro nuovo corso You and Me Friends. Avete avuto modo già di sfogliarlo online o il concessionario già ve lo ha portato a scuola? Fateci sapere, eh? Vi voglio anche far vedere adesso un attimo solo che apro la presentazione anche le altre magnifiche copertine del libro. Ecco qua, non so perché non me la... non so perché non me la... Eccole qua, scusate, ecco qua le copertine coloratissime di You and Me Friends. You and Me Friends non è un solo corso, è il primo corso di inglese per la scuola primaria che mette in comunicazione tutti i bambini delle classi di ogni parte d'Italia. E vi chiederete come è possibile tutto questo? È possibile grazie alla creazione di una bacheca che sarà attiva a partire da settembre, una bacheca che sarà esclusiva e virtuale, dedicata a voi insegnanti, in cui potete trovare classi di tutta Italia con cui attivare progetti di Pen Friends e tanti altri progetti. All'interno di questa bacheca poi scoprirete che ci saranno tanti materiali da condividere, dei webinar esclusivi solo per voi, ma non vogliamo svelarvi ancora tutto. Approfitto per dirvi che il prossimo appuntamento webinar sarà il 17 marzo, si intitolerà You and Me Pen Friends, l'inglese oltre l'aula, con 2 teacher trainers questa volta, con Lucia Badioli e Michelle Slatteri. Non dimenticate di seguirci sulla nostra pagina Facebook che viene aggiornata quotidianamente, dove troverete articoli sulla didattica, schede, anche materiale extra e anche i nostri blog dedicati. Vi volevo ricordare Diary of an English Teacher con Michelle Slattery, tra l'altro anche autrice del nostro ultimo ministeriale. Lei è insegnante di lingua inglese e è inglese nella scuola primaria, quindi è proprio perfetto. Non rubo altro tempo, Louise è qui vicino a me e ha tanti spunti da condividere sullo storytelling. A presto e vi ricordo che la registrazione del webinar sarà disponibile a partire da domani e i certificati entro una settimana vi verranno spediti via email. A presto e bye bye.
Hello and welcome to the Celtic Publishing webinar, Storytelling. It's a lot more than just a story, and I will read through my slides to you today, and I will give you an insight into storytelling lessons in English, which are practical, effective, and most importantly, fun. So as an English language teacher, I try to integrate storytelling activities at every opportunity. And I would like to share with you a selection of these simple story-based resources that can be adapted for different ages and abilities in this webinar. And before we start, I would like to look at some quotes on storytelling. So from Libert Bray, there is no greater power on this earth than story. Vera Nazarian, the world is shaped by 2 things, stories told and the memories they leave behind. And Jerome Bruner, we are storytelling creatures. And as children, we acquire language to tell those stories that we have inside of us. So just a few quotes on storytelling. So storytelling is the oldest form of teaching. It is universal and is as ancient as humankind. So before writing, there was storytelling. It is an intrinsic human characteristic. It exists to entertain, to inform, and to respect and appreciate other cultural traditions and values. We should all believe in the power of stories, and we ought to keep learning through storytelling strong and healthy. Storytelling through time. Well, storytelling originated with visual stories like cave paintings from 44,000 years ago. It progressed to oral traditions where stories were passed down from generation to generation by word of mouth, which moved to form words formed into narratives, including written, printed, and typed stories. So if we just have a look, we can see, I can imagine that the cavemen sat around their fire and talking about the images on this cave painting here and what was happening. We have other images as well, where we have a classic story time. Things haven't changed too much there. We've got sitting around a campfire. We have a grandfather telling stories of probably when he was a child too, to his grandson. And then we have parents or aunts and uncles that like to tell stories as well. I'd like to think that we've all had a story read to us. And I'd like to think as well that you've all had the opportunity to tell stories too. So the benefits of storytelling to young second language learners. Storytelling brings language learning alive, and children are natural learners. There are many examples of the advantages of using storytelling in language teaching in the English classroom. So do you tell stories in your classroom? And if so, what stories do you tell? Now, there are many examples of the advantages, and I've tried to narrow it down to those that are most important and most effective. So stories can enrich the students' learning experience because they are motivating and fun. And this encourages a positive attitude towards a foreign language. Stories exercise the imagination and creativity. Many young children then like to act out a well-known story. Stories provide a meaningful context for learning vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, sounds, and rhythm. Listening to stories in the classroom is a shared social experience. Shared emotions as a group, and the children can also connect to each other through a story. Repetition and chanting. Children love listening to the same stories over and over again, encouraging participation and acquisition of new vocabulary and structures. So, why use storytelling in a second language learning classroom? Well, stories are our primary tools of learning and teaching. They are used to reinforce conceptual development in children, like the colour, the size, the shape, and time. Stories are used to develop strategies for learning English, for example, guessing the meaning of new words, and also to develop their study skills. Skills such as listening skills and concentration on visual skills. storytelling, again, is like a living art, like music and dance. It is brought to life in performance. And it's very much like being a teacher. I find that when I'm in the classroom, I'm center stage and the children are my audience. So, and it's very similar when you are that storyteller as well. And if we look at the story of the three little pigs, each little pig needed building materials and tools to produce their own homes. Well, a storyteller needs those building materials and those tools to produce their story. And how do they do that? Well, a storyteller's building materials are the words, sounds, and language patterns, and the target language as well that you're aiming at. The storyteller's tools, voice, face, and hands. So you may have a loud voice, a low voice, a quiet voice to tell your story. You may use facial expressions to show that it's a happy setting or situation, or sad, or a bit of an anxious situation. And then you have your hands as well to gesture and to create actions. And the storyteller's product, well, that's the creation of a shared experience based on the words, the visuals, and the imagination. So tell me a story. If children are used to hearing stories in their mother tongue, they will be ready to hear them in a second language too. So don't worry that the children aren't going to understand word for word. Storytelling should be used as often as possible in the English language classroom. However, it does require a lot of prep time. But if you put that effort in and the preparation, it really is worth it, because the children will gain so much from a story. So here I would give you some tips, ideas, and activities to use with any story for your storytelling lessons that you can easily apply to different age groups. So let's open up a book. I've chosen a simple story. The Enormous Turnip. It's a much well-known, loved classical story, and maybe the younger children would be familiar with this in their own language. Now, I've chosen this story because for the young children, and when I say young, I mean from class 1 to class 3, the story is ideal for young children learning the language because the text is simple and it provides lots of repetition and opportunities for joining in. And that's what we want. We want to give the children the confidence to speak in the new language. And you can teach about people, family, and pet vocabulary. And to extend the language, children can talk about food and growing things. And if you are teaching other subjects, some CLIO lessons or a science lesson, then this story would be perfect to talk about the life cycle of a plant or a vegetable, or in this case, a turnip, which I think is rape in Italian. So it's always nice to start the lesson by introducing the characters and the theme of the new vocabulary that the primary students will be learning in the lesson. And this immediately gets the children interested in the topic and it will get them involved. And that's what we want. So we're going to look at some pre-storytelling tasks. Now, the pre means preparing for the story. We want to arouse the curiosity of the children. We want to set a purpose for listening and reading. And you may use a student's book or a big book, and you may talk about the title and the pictures on the cover. So never just open up a book, always observe the front cover and the title. Pictures in big books, and here's one from Story Lane. Pictures in big books help children to associate pictures and words and arrive at a better understanding of the story. Now, in the big book of this particular story of the Enormous Turnip, there is no text, so it's nice just to look at the pictures. You can go through with your students and see what the story is about. And as you see, we've got some beautiful illustrations here. And a story is more memorable if it's related to a sequence of pictures. You may want to pick out words or phrases which are essential to the story and have those words on your board or on your screen so they can see them and identify them when they hear each word at the time when it comes for you to actually read the story. So you may want to choose from this particular page here, granddad, grandma, boy. So there you've got some characters. Or some phrases, they pull and pull, but the turnip doesn't move. And again, you may want to create a story mat or a word bank used to familiarize students with simple key vocabulary words or phrases in the book. This is getting them prepared to also see the words in their storybook and make them familiar with the sounds and reading the words. This one I've taken from the internet from a different story of the Enormous Turnip. So you can see that there is once upon a little old man, the enormous turnip, happily ever after. So these would be words that you would expect the children to identify and understand. So this again, once you've gone through your book and you've looked just at the pages, remember that you haven't started reading yet. You're simply going through the pages, looking at the illustrations, but it's an opportunity to ask simple questions about the pictures that help introduce the 3 elements of a story, and they are the characters, the setting, and the plot. So you may ask, who is this? Where are they? What can you see? Is it daytime or nighttime? Is there a problem? What's the problem? So again, you're trying to elicit from the children enthusiasm and get them saying their first few words perhaps. And even if they come back to you in their mother tongue language, that's fine. That is not a problem because you're checking their comprehension as well. Another great task is once you've gone through the events, go back to the front cover and look again at the title. Point out the word enormous. Again, you may want to have that written up in big letters on the board, and you can ask them what they think this word means. You may go back to a page and say, look, the turnip is enormous. Look, you can give them synonyms as well. It's big. The turnip is very big. It's huge. It's gigantic. And you can use those words as you're pointing out the images from the book. So I can see an enormous turnip, a very big turnip, a gigantic turnip. Once they've got the concept of the word enormous, you can invite the children to think of enormous things such as an elephant, a whale, a mountain. And again, they can say these in their mother tongue, and that's fine. Point to the turnip on the front cover, and it's got one here, or the first page, and ask the children to show you with their arms how big they think the turnip is. So you may ask, is it this big? Is it this big? Is it this big? And of course, the children are going to stretch their arms as wide as they possibly can. And that when they do that and they're coming back to you, that's when you have their attention. So now that you have your students' attention, you can now begin to tell your story. So storytelling tasks. This is the moment where we go into the story world. We actually go into the story itself. Now you can read or tell the story, but if you don't feel comfortable, there is the audio CD from this particular book that you can play and listen to. If you do prefer to read it or tell it, if you want to memorize it, that's fine. Remember to read slowly and loudly and clearly with your class. And remember, you're looking carefully at the pictures. As you tell your story, they will hear all the vocabulary and phrases from the pre-storytelling tasks. And that's why the pre-storytelling tasks are so important, because the children will then identify the main characters, the setting, and the events of the story. They will start to feel familiar with the story. So for the first storytelling, let the children just listen and enjoy without any interruptions. Because if you stop and start and stop and start at your first reading, you'll lose your children's attention, and that's not what you want. They will, in any case, enjoy the sounds of the new language and be engaged by the illustrations. And you can tell them that for the next storytelling, you want the children to help you retell it. Okay, at this point, you may want to get the children to repeat keywords and phrases and add actions. And with each new word, use an emphasis in your voice. So you may want to give them actions for every time they hear the word dog or cat or mouse. You may want to use voice emphasis every time you say the word grandad to a big deep voice, grandad, or grandma with a high voice. You can use action and voice emphasis. The seed grows and grows and grows. They pull and pull and pull. So you can get the children to repeat this as well. During your second or third retelling of the story, it doesn't matter how many times, they will enjoy it all the same. You can encourage children to participate. And we can do this in many different ways, from chorusing to chanting and singing. Now, chorusing, you can select sentences from the story which are suitable for speaking aloud. The children repeat after you all together. And chorusing helps children to learn and pronounce key vocabulary. And you may add actions to help memorize the sentence. So in my example here, I've got the sun shines and the seed grows. And you would repeat it, the sun shines and the seed grows. and get them to do the same. Once you've acquired that, you can move on to chanting. Now, chanting is an extension of chorusing in which repetition is used together with rhythm and stress. So from here we could say, Grandad, Grandma, the boy and the girl, pull, 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 pull. Or the dog and the cat and the mouse, pull, 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 pull. And again, repeat it using your intonation. And from that point, if you the children are really enthusiastic, you can extend it to singing. And there's a lovely song that comes from the Enormous Turnip from the Story Lane volume. The children can learn the words together with actions. So let's have a listen of the song. Sing along.
Granddad, Grandma, the boy and the girl, pull, 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 but the turnip doesn't move. Help, 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 help. The dog, the cat and the mouse. Pull, 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 pull. Now the turnip, wow, is out.
Looking at storytelling tasks and predicting. You must encourage the children to predict what's coming next. They will know the story by now and have a good idea, but it gives them an opportunity to start using their language. You can stop where it is appropriate and ask questions. And at a beginner level, they can reply in their mother tongue. And at higher levels, I would expect maybe a short phrase or complete sentences in English. So you may look at a particular page. Let's have a look. What is the problem? What does Grandad do? He paused and he paused and he paused. Who will help Grandad pull the turnip? Of course, they're going to say, yes, it's Grandma. And you can repeat with the other characters. So you can see that there's the boy that comes to help, but there's still a problem. So who will come and help now? And see if they can remember the girl. So you can continue with this sequence over again, trying to get the children, encourage the children to predict what is coming next. Another technique is a close technique, which is where you continue to read the story and invite children to complete the sentence. So in the example here, we have Grandad plants a. You can use actions as well to encourage them to say the word seed. The sun shines and the seed grows and you will get them starting to say the words as well. And you can repeat this several times. So the post-storytelling tasks. Post-storytelling tasks are a great opportunity for language work and to check comprehension. As you can see, we have sequence cards and story maps. They're engaging resources and they work on sequencing skills, story retelling skills, and answering question skills. And in this particular photocopyable worksheet that we have, you can see that numbers have been reinforced here as well, looking at. So you can count the number of characters. So how many characters can you see? 1. Who is he? It's Grandad. And then the children can then decide which is the next part of the sequence. Again, how many characters can you see? 1, 2, 3. Can you name them? Granddad, grandma, the boy. And then the children can cut and stick them out, put them in order and colour them. Another idea is the story map, which looks at, again, the characters. It looks at question words, so looking at the setting, where does the story take place? Or when does the story take place? Is it in the morning? Is it in the afternoon? Is it at night time? How does the story start? And again, the children are encouraged to think about the correct order of the story, or they can simply draw pictures to what they believe is the correct order of the story. Other sequencing ideas, we've got one here. We've got a mini book, as you can see, and a sequencing fan. Sequencing activities identify the components of the story. There's the beginning, the middle, and the end. And children can use these simple activities to retell the events with pictures. And in this one, we have the turnip on the front, and then we have the characters. But you can encourage the children to talk about the different events and what's happened. And you can do the same with a sequencing fan as well. And the children can either get a photocopyable sheet with the images, or they can simply draw their own. When you get children to do follow-up activities, it's always nice to have a classroom display. So if you have an area in your classroom or in the corridor, it's always nice to put up the children's work. It just makes them feel really proud, not only of the work they've done, but it's something that they can talk about in another language as well. And here we have the lap book. As you can see, and lap books are great tools, and I have one here that was done recently. Okay, it allows the students to revise the knowledge, and it stimulates creativity and cooperation in the many educational needs. It's a visual tool. It's three-dimensional and interactive that students create inside a folder. As you can see, everything is contained inside. And there's all the material inside relating to the educational part or the given theme, collected and organized as a lap book. Here students can also work on the characteristics of the characters, create maps of the setting, especially for the older children. Activities of this type offer the opportunity to further develop language skills. Here we've got another mini book, so we can pull it out. I'll just take it out and show you. Again, so it's got the sequencing here on the front and on the back, so the children can talk about it. Again, you've got all the vocabulary here: plant, water, seed, sun, grow. So everything the enormous turnip needs. And here, extra vocabulary about the parts of a turnip, the roots, the leaves of the turnip. And again, sequencing the characters around, putting them into the correct order. So it really is a great project after the story for the children to do. And in the Story Lane project, each student has the opportunity to create their very own lap book of the fiction book that comes with the course. 5-finger retell. Now, the 5-finger retell is a visual-based strategy to help children retell a story. The thumb represents the setting and the questions when and where. The index finger represents the characters and the question who. And the next 3 fingers represent the beginning, the middle, and the end, which are the events of the story. Now, if you're doing this with older children from class 4 or class 5, you can still have the setting, when and where, the characters, who. The middle finger can represent the events of the story, the beginning, the middle, and the end. And then this finger here can represent the problem of the story and the solution of the story. And you can do this with a simple gardening glove. And that way you're eliciting all the information that the children have got to tell you how the story went. Another great activity is the storytelling jar. I love this because you can adapt it in so many different ways. It's fun, engaging, and it can be used for different focal points and different age groups. The children get to pull out strips of card that you can see, different coloured cards, depending on what the focal points are. And they can read a word or a phrase on the strip or talk about an event or the character of the story. So in class 1, 2, and 3, you may have strips of card with just vocabulary from the story. So you may have the cat, the dog, the enormous turnip, granddad, grandma, the names of the characters, and phrases from the story. So they pull and pull and pull, but the turnip doesn't move. So the children can select a colour card and just read what they have. Now, for an older age group, you may want to extend that and have pieces of card, strips of card, where children have to give a character description or a setting description, talk about the problem, talk about the solution, or the children can simply talk about maybe a favourite character or a favourite part of the story. Or, I mean, it's entirely up to you. You can do this depending on what your focus is. Maybe the children can talk about a character that they didn't like, or and part of the story that they didn't like. So that's a really, really good activity. Then we have drama role play. Now, all children like to at some point act out a scene. You can invite children to mime the story as you read it again and let them choose the character that they want to be. They may go through all the characters in one storytelling, or they may be particularly passionate about just being the grandma or the mouse. Other ideas can be to, again, retell the story using finger puppets, where they can mime actions as well. Every time they hear or you say the word granddad or enormous turnip, they can use the finger puppets. Or you can learn actions again to a song. If you want to extend it even more, which I will talk about in my next webinars that I have coming up, you can look at a script for children, an actual drama script that comes from the Page to Stage books, and you will find the script in there. So there's lots and lots of things that you can really extend it. Now, I just want to recap all the storytelling tasks. So remember the pre-storytelling tasks. We've looked at big books and pictures, word banks and story maps, questions and predictions, identifying new vocabulary and using synonyms for certain words. Remember that the pre-storytelling tasks are vital because that's your method to get the children interested. There are the storytelling tasks that we've looked at, which are adding actions, voice emphasis, chorusing, chanting, and singing. And there's also the close technique, that when you're telling your story, you stop and get the children to finish some of the words for you. There aren't so many tasks for the storytelling. That's simply because you don't want too many interruptions whilst you're telling a story. And then you've got the post-storytelling tasks that we've looked at. And as I said, it's a great opportunity for language work. So we have sequencing, story maps, the lap books, the 5-finger retell, the storytelling jar, drama and role play. And of course, there's so much more, even a simple drawing of their favorite character or from the favorite part of their story with a little phrase underneath from the story, and that's fine as well. So here are the classical stories that come from Story Lane. Today I've looked at the Enormous Turnip, but there are there's the Bremen Town Musicians, Journey to the Center of the Earth, Frankenstein, and A Midsummer's Night's Dream. And I'm going to be looking a little bit in more detail for the older children, so maybe classes 3, 4, and 5 in my next webinar. And we're going to be looking a little bit how we can integrate these stories with CLIL lessons. So be sure to be there for the next webinar. So being that we're looking at Story Lane, the course book offers a complete collection of materials for teaching with the tool of easy storytelling activities, from the classical stories to the original stories that are inside the actual course book. And for each story in every volume, there are various activities proposed for the class, using the photocopyable pages that are presented in the teacher's guide. And here are the course books. So what better way to engage your young learners to learn and improve not only their grammar and vocabulary, but also their language learning skills for Story Lane. And this is where it all begins. So I've got Story Lane 1 here, but it's a great book to look into for the young children, because it introduces the children to identifying their first main character, who's Jane. And together they get to meet other characters, Jack, Jill, and Carrot the cat. They get to see what a setting is. Now, the setting takes place, in this case, in Jane's garden, where children then get to learn simple greetings, structures, instructions, and easy vocabulary. And the nice thing with this book is that in Unit 2, there are an extra 5 original fiction stories: Colours in the Garden, Time for School, The Pirate and the Treasure, In the Park, Welcome to the Family Circus. And in each Storytime episode, there is the option to watch the digital version on LIM. And inside the teacher's guide, you will find lots of fun and motivating activities to go along with each story. But all the different activities and tasks that I've mentioned, you can use those for each of these stories as well. So I started with some quotes at the beginning of my webinar, and I would like to finish this webinar with a quote from Gianni Rodari. La fiaba è il luogo di tutte ipotesi. Essa ci può dare delle chiavi per entrare nella realtà per strade nuove. Può aiutare il bambino a conoscere il mondo. Okay, so as from tomorrow, you will find as well all the slides, the recording of this webinar, and if you go on to Raffaello, www.raffaelloformazione.it, you will find everything there as from tomorrow. Questions? So what about Harry Potter? Could it be suitable reading for 4th and 5th grade? I suggest 5th grade, but it really does depend on the level of your children's English. Maybe you can change the vocabulary for more difficult words. You can use the synonyms as well and break it down to maybe a more easy, readable for second language learners section there. I'm just reading some questions here. Retelling the story. Yeah, great. Taking a video of you reading the story. Some children at some schools as well, they use iPads as well, and it's great to take videos of the teacher, or you can get the children to take videos of themselves or each other, telling the stories and the different events of the stories. And that's a brilliant tip to do as well. Well done. So in my next webinar, I will be focusing a lot more at CLIL lessons as well, along with storytelling, such as history, geography, science, etc. So I'm going to show you all the different activities that we can include there. I've got some more questions. Well, thank you. Okay. How many times is it best to tell the same story? Well, in one lesson, remember that you're going to be spending a lot of time just looking through the pictures, and maybe once, twice actually reading the story, but then you can always go back to it in your second lesson. Remember, a storytelling lesson is not one lesson. You can extend it to several different lessons. Story mixing second language learners and language and Italians with other international students, fine, absolutely. We're doing this to acquire a new language, so these can be adapted, all these tasks can be adapted for a mixed class as well. Okay, so on that note, thank you so much for joining me on this webinar, and I look forward to seeing you on my next webinar next month. Okay, so see you soon. Bye-bye.